Hello there, Happy New Year to you! I hope 2020 will be a good start for everyone! Oh no. For me, however, I wanted to take a quick look back at the last decade and found out what games that stood out the most. Therefore, I was able, with great difficulty I might add, to write down the top 10 games that meant the most to me from 2010 to 2019. I will exclude remasters, HD versions and enhanced editions though. If I kept those, already 3 of the games would have been old gems from my top 10 games of all times list, so now that we know all this, again keep in mind that this is my own personal favorite games, not objectively the best ones, let's quickly go through some honorable mentions. From the same year, by the same company, Resident Evil 2 Remake and Devil May Cry 5, please remember that remakes are different from remasters, both of these are fantastic games and I genuinely love them both, but they sadly didn't make it to the main list. Fire Emblem Awakening and Three Houses, I'm a fan of this series and these two are the strongest out there in this franchise in my opinion, so yeah. Undertale, the fandom killed this slowly and surely for me, but the game itself is something standing out, and I have played RPGs that allows pacifist rules before, but the characters truly get a thumbs up. Smash Bros. Ultimate, I suck at Smash, but my lord do I adore this game. After so long, I can finally play as HYRULE and Banjo and Kazooie. The only character that I would want now to really complete my wish list would be Midna. But aside from that, Ultimate is an amazing experience. Persona 4 Golden introduced me into the Persona franchise and is still, in my eyes, the best in the series. The only games that I haven't played here are the 2 first ones. And finally, in the mentions category, Divinity Original Sin 2. This one was so close in getting to the main list, but even if I supported it on Kickstarter, even if I played the hell out of it when it first came out, even if I'm currently having a multiplayer run with my friends on my Twitch channel, please follow me, it never could keep my attention. I hope that I can fully complete it now with my friends. It is a fantastic video game, but there was another CRPG that, you know, got into the list instead, but we'll get to that later. And so here we are, top 10 games from the previous decade that means the world to me personally. And yes, it will all be in a set order, but all of them are highly loved. And so we begin with number 10, Darksiders 2. The game I've replayed most in my life, which is weird to me to be honest, but seriously, when this game first came out, I was stuck in that world. The combat system, the world exploration, the music, the loot and customization of your character, and finally the story of death, the leader of the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. While Darksiders 1 felt more consistent with its linearity, D2 has this hold over me in how you can build and level up. Want to be a necromancer that summons overpowered zombies? Go for it. Close combat is more your cup of tea? Alrighty. Just focus on the stuff that builds up your Reaper gauge and go to town? That's my favorite. The combat can get a bit repetitive, true, and it does contain a bit of jank. Like seriously, the definitive edition of the game, god I hate that name, has so many game-breaking stuff that I can't understand how they haven't fixed it yet. An example would be that if you go to the Archon Angel, it will crash. Every time. It always crashes there for me, I don't know what to do. No clue on what's causing this, but it hurts. But aside from its stability, I adore every playthrough. I'm really happy that Darksiders Genesis is as good as it is, meaning that there's a chance that we could get death in the same kind of game. But yeah, Darksiders 2 is my number 10, and I'm going to eventually make a video on him, but give me a break, so many video game characters. Jumping on to the next video game though, number 9, Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. So I'm not the biggest MMORPG fan out there. I grew up with WoW, but I stopped after defeating the Lich King, cause Warcraft 3 was one of my childhood games. And I did try to get into Elder Scrolls Online, but that game never clicked with me. The only exception here was Final Fantasy XIV. There was a few reasons for this, one being the typical MMO reason. I was in a tough place in my life and it helped me go through that bleak period. And also the fact that I started playing it during the Final Fantasy XIII period, which were the few games with lightning that just made me almost hate the franchise. I'm not joking, I genuinely stopped loving Final Fantasy because I was not happy with the direction they took. But the massive multiplayer game caught my interest and I have loved it ever since. No gameplay here, as you can see, as I want my character to stay private, so sorry for the lousy section, but that's just how it is. Number 8, YOOKA-LAYLEE, another game I supported through Kickstarter and another game I have replayed tons of times, 100%ed it 5 times on my Switch and 4 times on my PC. Banjo-Tooie is one of my favorite games of all time, so having another collectathon by the original developers always was a wish, so finally having that come true made me so happy. I'm aware of the heavy critique it got when it was first released, and I don't want to sound like a bland fanboy in saying that most of it was unfound. Like seriously, I watched so many videos online of people reviewing the game, and so much of it was laughable. It felt like they were just jumping on the hate bandwagon. If that makes me sound blind, then you know what? That's fine with me, because that won't change how I feel about it. To sort of prove that I'm a critical dude, I guess you could simply watch my review, but to summarize some issues, camera can work against you, flying feels weird, the reuse of a lot of mechanics for puzzles throughout the entire experience, the characters are great, the enemies not so much, the minigames are very hit and miss in that you have to play them twice to get every pagey, and the transformations feels a bit underused, aside from the pirate ship. But with the great music, writing, level design and well-planned collectibles, I'd say that it's sitting on my number 8 truly strongly. What does not sit that steady on my list, though mostly due to its jank, is number 7. Alpha Protocol. Being an individual that grew up with a lot of James Bond movies, having a spy RPG primarily focused on the choice and consequences is definitely something I can't look away from. But also I can't pretend that doesn't exist would be all of the issues in the game. It is very difficult to get into the spy adventure. Looking past all of the bugs, the first time I played this game I couldn't understand why I kept missing all of my shots when I was in combat, so my bread and butter character was always the spy class, focusing primarily on stealth and CQC. But when I returned to this game when I was much older and went into it with the idea that the combat was like mixing reaction-based shooting and dice rolls into a new blend, I could play the game just fine. You get a critical hit if you stay out of cover and aim for a long time. You will get a critical failure if you shoot without aiming. Very high risk, high reward. It speaks for itself, but if you get this game expecting that you can just run and gun, you'll be put off by it. You can build and level up your character to be like that, but it will take some time until Michael Thornton is actually good at shooting. So what makes this game what it is to me was the RPG part of the experience. The writing is pure gold, and it's so interesting. The conversation mechanics are godlike. Preparing for missions makes you feel like the biggest badass ever, and there are actual consequences there. Some missions are purely conversational, and depending on what you say or do, it can change future encounters with characters. This game, to me, is what Vampire the Masquerade is to its fans. A flawed game with a lot of good stuff in it. I like it, and I'm hoping for a sequel, and please get the back game to Steam. Number 6, SOULCALIBUR. 6. This will be the last time I say this since I've gone through this so many times, but because this list is recapping the decade, I feel like it works there. I grew up with fighting games, but I only button mashed. Then when Injustice Gods Among Us came out in 2013, I decided it was time to actually learn the mechanics, and the more I learned, the more I fell in love with this genre. And a few games really stood out to me. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, yes, I'm not lying, Mortal Kombat X, and of course, SOULCALIBUR 6. What I find strange is that the characters are what makes fighting games cool, and I can say with full certainty that MVCI and MKX have more interesting characters in my opinion. But when it comes to the gameplay, the character creator, Scalena! They really made this fighter the one to appear on this list. I stream this game quite often with friends, so it is constantly there with me, and after I made the Siegfried video, the lore and the world was always fascinating. Again, not to the extent of the 2 previous games, but the stories here are fantastic. I know that if I look more into the other characters, I will probably fall even harder for this game, but I don't think it is needed at the moment. Many SoulCal fans have some issues with this installment because of the clash mechanics and whatnot, but to me, this is my favorite fighting game of all time. Number 5, Hyrule Warriors. Definitive Edition. This is just here because of my inner Zelda fanboy. I adore the original on the previous console, but the Definitive Edition, which is the same game with some changes including 60 FPS, is what I played the most on my Switch. The story is stupid. Horny lady wants Link's D. The gameplay is for the most part going just autopilot. I can't help myself. This is a chill game to play, as strange as that may be. The music is godlike, the characters are all different, not only moveset wise, but their strengths and weaknesses. We can play as our fave characters from this franchise. I've already made several reviews for the different versions of this game, so just watch those, but the only thing I can say that makes this my number 5 is this. We can play as Twilly Midna. Number 4, Daggerfall Unity. This one I'm a bit unsure of. I'm sure that it is my number 4, but is it a remake? It is made by a fan from the ground up, and it is in the Unity engine, so yeah. What you're currently looking at is a heavily modded version of Daggerfall Unity, because this version of this classic 96 game allows modders to make something truly special. And it is free, so link in the description to the site. Anyways, the Elder Scrolls franchise as a whole holds a special place in my heart. The world of Tamriel means so much to me, which is why I'm terrified of the future of this series, all things considered. However, here we have the Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall Unity, which means that I prefer this game over Skyrim, and yes, I do. This isn't really an RPG and more of a fantasy world simulator. Almost everything is procedurally generated, which explains why this world is so extremely massive, only beaten by Minecraft and No Man's Sky. Great thing here is that everything is timed and the story doesn't scream at you for doing whatever you want. There is so much I wish I could say about this game, but to be honest, I think I want to make a whole separate video in the future, so yeah. Time to get to my top 3 games. Number 3, Dishonored. This game is just a masterclass of game making, expert level design, true atmospheric music and art style, deep lore that does not clash against gameplay. The mechanics are insanely deep but easy to learn. This game is so freaking good, and I doubt I need to go into much detail to why. Personally, I love the story. The characters are so intriguing and memorable, and it doesn't fear using that against us. Without a doubt, Dishonored is one of the most replayable out there. Arcane Studios are masters at making games like this, and I do feel that objectively speaking, this is their best game so far. The sequel is good and it improves a lot from the first one, primarily the combat, but there is something that the 2012 one nails that no other in the series ever did. I mean, when I returned to it when making my Corvo video, I found several new stuff that I was unaware of the first time I played it all those years back. Dishonored is one of the few that I yearly return to every October, and I'm proud of it. I do hope for a 4th installment. The franchise is put on hold, but seriously, please don't be dead. Number 2, Mass Effect 2. The original Mass Effect trilogy is pretty godlike. I'm not that fond of sci-fi, so I actually didn't try any of them out before a friend of mine almost forced me to play this one, as I just called them Dragon Age, but in space. So as I said, I did give Mass Effect 2 a try, and yeah, I heavily prefer this series over the fantasy one. The Normandy crew, they're all perfect. The story is good, and the freaking music I still listen to while writing scripts. I will admit though, this is probably the only RPG I never experiment with when it comes to character creator, both when it comes to the look of Shepard and the class system. I'm a pure soldier boy. Mass Effect is my favorite sci-fi world without a single doubt. The series may have ended a bit poorly, in more ways than one, but this trilogy will most likely be replayed even after the next decade. I hold them that high. And so here we are with my number 1, pretty much close to being my favorite video game of the previous decade, excluding, you know, remasters and all that jazz. It is the game that pretty much pushed the Vinti Original Sin out of the list, and it is number 1, Pathfinder KingMaker. I'm pretty new to the whole Dungeons & Dragons dice roll gameplay, as I am currently playing my first campaign of all time with a few buddies of mine, but when I learned about the very deep games like this, whether it be trying the original 2 Fallout games, or Daggerfall, or Planescape Torment, none of them truly went so deep into the mechanics like Pathfinder KingMaker did. This is the biggest, deepest, and longest RPG I've ever played and seen, and never did it get boring throughout my first playthrough that lasted almost 140 hours. For comparison's sake, I beat Planescape on my first playthrough in less than 30 hours. This game is massive. When it was first released, it was apparently more buggy than even the average Bethesda game, but I didn't try it until late 2019 because I heard that you could become a king in this game, which means a lot to me, as you may have noticed. I like royal stuff, so I tried it out and it has been able to slither my way to not only here, but into my top 10 game list of all time. So I pretty much love everything about this game. Gameplay is really deep, like insanely so much that my first playthrough I did so many poor gameplay decisions, it's insane, because I didn't really understand everything, which is true even now to some extent. The kingdom management mechanics, I applaud. You genuinely feel like you're making hard decisions and controlling a kingdom, which will cause both good and bad stuff to happen, and the presentation is pretty good as well. Focus on the music, of course. I will admit that the look of the game visually can be a bit bland to some extent, but I feel like it adds something to the adventure, like a weird realism, if you will. One thing I will say though, I am using one mod that makes this game so much fun to play, and that is the turn-based combat one. Preference-wise, I just can't enter the Baldur's Gate real-time combat with pause, so yeah, one mod to make it one of my favorite games. I am currently having a new playthrough on my Twitch channel, an evil sorceress with some draconian blood, allowing her to turn into a dragon eventually. So if you're interested, you know where to go. And I will say this quickly. This might be still like the honeymoon phase of the game, even after 140 hours. Actually 150 hours with the new stream, the new playthrough. But again, the idea that I can finish a playthrough with more than 100 hours and go back into a new game and still feel the same excitement, and I don't really want to rush anything and enjoy everything, that should say something, right? And that is my list. It was difficult going through the entire 10 years of video games, but these are the ones that stood out to me. What about you though? Write your list down below, whether you have 10 or just 1. I'm interested in reading about what meant so much to you. But until next time, I'm KingJGrim, or the guy who have a bit of a rage quit recently, whatever you prefer, and I'll see you guys next time.